Hi, and welcome to the first ever live recording of Future of XYZ. Today, we're going to be talking about the future of not fast furniture with industrial designer Brad Ascalon. Brad is here with us at NeoCon. Brad, thanks for being part of XYZ.
Thank you so much for having me here. I love it.
This is really exciting. I've actually never sat across from someone while I'm interviewing them. It makes it a little interesting and a little strange, but also awesome. You run an award-winning studio based in New York / Long Island, where you live. You're regarded as one of the leading American design voices of your generation. When you graduated from Pratt with your master's in industrial design, I believe Wallpaper magazine named you 10 most wanted emerging designers that year. You've since had 20 years of your studio working in furniture mostly for
hmm
contract, hospitality, residential, plus lighting, packaging, and other consumer products. We're going to talk today about not fast furniture. And
Yes,
we're
we
going to
are.
start by defining that, which is always the same question for every episode of XYZ. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Absolutely. So it's such a broad question. It's such a broad topic. And I think you could approach the idea of not fast furniture in so many ways. And, there has to be some understanding of quality, of longevity, of kind of human connection. What it's not is quick to market furniture that, fulfills a need for a trend or a fad that's going to fade away. So I think there's so much in that we can squeeze into the conversation today.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I'm just going to start out with a provocation.
Okay.
Is not fast furniture different from what most of the furniture industry is creating today?
No, I think a lot of companies are creating amazing products. I think there seems to be this need for filling in spaces and having less attention placed on the filler. And I think that's where we're kind of going with this idea of not fast furniture. Everything needs intention. Everything needs to be, when you're putting a product into the market, you have responsibility, right, to your customers, to the people who are using it, to those stakeholders, and certainly to the environment. So when you're tasked with designing furniture and putting it out there, there's different approaches to it. And I think a lot of companies, more than ever, especially in the contract market, understand that. They want to be as sustainable as possible. We're really creating inclusive aspects that were really never even part of the conversation 5-10 years ago.
Well, that's an interesting piece I just want to very briefly
Yeah.
touch on. Is there a difference that you're seeing in this approach to not fast furniture versus fast furniture between the consumer market and the contract market?
Well, most of the work I do is contract, right? The consumer market, I think, has a long way to catch up, and they're not there. Some companies want to be there, but I think there's a big difference between the two. Yeah.
And just for listeners who aren't in this like neocon environment, who are totally indoctrinated, let's just say, in the furniture industry, very briefly, what's the difference between contract and not contract furniture?
Oh, so that's a funny question because when I got into this industry, I didn't even know there was a difference. It was just furniture, right? I came to my first NeoCon show and I realized at the time, 18, 19 years ago, you would sit in a sofa and it was hard. It was not meant to be comforting. It was not meant to support you. It was meant to be temporary because you're in a lobby, you're in your waiting room, something like that, and that was contract furniture at the time, and then all of a sudden this hospitality element to contract furniture came in years later, and now it's all just so homogenized in a beautiful way,
Interesting. I think that's one of the things that's interesting to me about you. I mean, we've known each other now for a number of years since I joined IF Design, actually.
Yep.
You were one of the first people I met, and as I've gotten to know you, I think it's really interesting to learn your background, which you came out of quite an artistic house. Your father's pretty well-renowned sculptor. Your grandfather was an industrial designer. You've often said that growing up in that kind of household really kind of gave you a feeling for both creativity but also materiality, which probably influences your work quite a bit. That sense of craftsmanship and the rigor perhaps of your design practice.
Right.
How did you eventually find your way from, like, you were like, I'm not doing the family business, quote unquote. You were like, I'm going to study business.
Yep.
But you found your way obviously back to this. How did that happen? And like, where's the role of that rigor in the not fast furniture space?
That's a lot. Okay, so yeah. So my father's an artist. He does his whole life. He's done amazing installations in the world of stained glass and sculpture, and my grandfather the same. And so materiality to me was something like the materials are something you respect. If you're not going to make good use of them, it's not worth doing, right? When I was 14 years old, 15 years old, my mom would pick me up from high school and take me to the studio, and I was my father's apprentice. I'd learn how to do mosaics and metal sculpture, welding, and all of that. And so I just loved, I loved that aspect of it. I loved creating. When it was time to like go to school, I bucked the family grain, and I wanted to do business, so I went into pre-business, took all the curriculum, and all the courses. And I was, as a family of a creative, I was taking microeconomic analysis, macroeconomic analysis, money and banking. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, I don't belong here.
Right.
Eventually I found my way into the music industry, the music industry, which is really where I wanted to be. And after about 3-4 years of that, I was like, I can't be around these people. I can't be around this industry. It's not what I thought it was. I had this quarter life crisis. And my father, who I loved to death, but we never had heart to heart. He just sat with me one day. He's like, son, look into architecture. And I was like, okay, I'll look into architecture, Along that way, I found industrial design. And I was just like, you mean people actually make these things? It's not a button you push and a conveyor belt and something comes out. I became fascinated with it. My take on it, though, was like, I love the idea that you can influence people. You can create something that people want to own or need to own or make their lives better. So I departed, like the creativity went from physical creation to kind of ideation and creation of mass-produced products.
What I love about that story is like, it's not just pressing a button. Wait, what? Like,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
most people on this planet who are not creators don't actually think about the process. I mean, it's like anything that you get involved in, you don't necessarily think about the process. And even you who had been in your father's studio for your whole life didn't realize like how much rigor goes into all of this.
Yeah.
It's obvious that materials are a big part of your practice, but there are other things as well. Because we have so much that we could cover on this, Brad, we're going to go into like most of this is like a rapid fire, which is not really rapid fire because they're not rapid fire questions, but I'm gonna ask you to be as succinct as possible so we can get through the maximum amount.
Okay, you guide me.
The same, okay?
All right.
So the first is working with clients ranging from global brands to startups, and you've been shown all over the world, you've been published all over the world, but you really work with a lot of big companies everywhere, in every continent. What are you seeing in the marketplaces of the world that concern you vis-a-vis not fast furniture or fast furniture, and what is giving you hope?
We'll start with the hope. I think I'm more optimistic now about the industry than I've been in a long time. I think the advent of artificial intelligence and the concern that it's going to like really inject itself into our market, I think that gives us an opportunity to like not prove it wrong, but use it wisely and actually find new opportunities to make people's lives better, to make the material choices, the process choices that we kind of go on a daily basis to make those better. So there's a lot of hope there, and I think a lot of most companies in this building for sure are tuned to that. What worries me is that as design gets more popular, as it's gotten so popular, over the past couple decades, it's become fashion, and that's all over the world, and I think that the concern is that there is going to we're going to continue that quick disposable furniture trend the way we're doing with fashion. So that's the biggest concern I have.
It's fascinating. I actually just have to say that, I obviously started my career in fashion, and what I find interesting about what's happening in furniture to some degree, is in fact that there is this kind of almost trend towards celebrity influence, etc. And I think there's like this hype cycle and celebrity engagement. It's funny that you just mentioned that because it's actually the next question I had prepared, which is there's a difference perhaps between like big D designer, right? Like the people who have the creds, and then the little D designer of this like influencer creative. Is there a role of that kind of difference and respect and education understanding in this market right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely there's a split between types of designers, and it's almost like we need a new term for it, and I thought about that a lot. I think the design that I'm talking about, it's almost like you're a functionalist. There's a stylist and then there's the functionalist. Um, and of course, there's a need for both, but the functionalist also has to be a stylist. The stylist doesn't necessarily have to be a functionalist, you know? We can solve problems and then create solutions that are beautiful and people want to be around. And you know, they could even be like just Easter eggs in the product. You don't even realize what's going on under the hood, but it's ergonomically designed so that your back doesn't hurt at the end of the day, or it's, you know, making collaboration better, or all of that. And it still just looks great, you know? And I think the looking great part is the dangerous part, because you can't we can't continue to do that without the functional aspects, without the human need.
Well, I mean, that leads also nicely to what I want to talk about, which is here we are at NeoCon, which for anyone who's not familiar, NeoCon is a big contract furniture show in Chicago. It takes place in Fulton Market, but also in the Mart. It's Fulton Design Days plus NeoCon in the Merchandise Mart, where we are sitting right now with Sandow, Surround Podcast Network. But you just previewed with Darren, a sofa that you call a sensory dimmer switch, because at the push of a button, someone can adjust and change the privacy or the feel of a space. It also just won, I think last night, it was announced NeoCon's Best of Show for Business Impact. Talk about the importance of that personal sensory control in furniture of the future.
So everybody is on some spectrum of neurodiverse spectrum, right? Some of us have sensitivities to light, some of us have sensitivities to sound, visuals, etc. And I think there are these micro innovations that we could start to incorporate into almost everything we do. The collection, Limousine collection, was just this idea that, you know, it doesn't have to be a privacy sofa, lounge chair, etc. all the time. So why don't we give it the ability to lower, to get natural light in, to have a line of sight throughout an office space. And then when you need those moments of privacy, when you need to get cocoon yourself from the noise, the sound, private conversation, it's literally the push of a button, you know, and that screen goes up and now you're private. And what that does is that actually visually cues other people. I shouldn't go there right now. They're in their thing. They're doing, you know,
they're doing their thing.
They're doing their thing. I'll come back. A high back sofa doesn't allow for that, right? It's not messaging anything. If you're in it, you don't know if you can approach somebody or
Right.
not. So this allows it's a directive, like, leave me alone for now.
It's so interesting. Or don't, or come join me, or whatever.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
and it's, of course, contract furniture there. No one's going to have one of these in their home, but in an office space, especially open plan office
Yeah.
spaces or big hospitality spaces that get co-working, et cetera. These
Education.
are
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
You also have debuted a chair called the Redondo for Martin Bachot. It's
Bertrude,
Bertrude, sorry. And it's a hug you kind of lounge chair. How do you solve problems in not fast furniture with these kind of thoughtful details?
Oh, that was interesting. You know, they wanted me to create lounge furniture that was all upholstery, because their specialty is upholstery. They do it so beautifully. And, you know, I started with this club chair, and I said, well, what if we invert the club chair, the circular kind of arms that usually go out? Let's just modernize this. Let's see what happens. And we played around with it, and you turn those arms in, right? And then you just create this, it's a simple little pocket where you're sitting in the chair, and it's kind of hugging you. It's like just taking care of you, you know, like physically, a little bit emotionally, you know. And it's not like a game changer by any means, but it's just a little wink to the person using it, you know.
I love that. I love that. Obviously, there are some limitations of the global supply chain that have become very manifest in the last couple of years in the U.S., but elsewhere. Tariffs, ongoing economic concerns, et cetera.
Yeah.
How do you think this is and will continue to affect, especially the not fast furniture business?
Well, I mean, the opportunity for American brands to be producing in America changes all of that, you know? I mean, this was once a major manufacturing hub, and you're seeing that back again. I mean, in Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania and North Carolina and LA even, you know, there's a pride in manufacturing here in the U.S. for these American brands. Now, not everything can be done here. We don't have the bandwidth for all of that. We don't have the machinery for all that, the techniques for all that. But cost, I mean, during this whole tariff ride, companies were pricing and repricing, constantly trying to strategize what we're going to do. I think in the long run, the more we can make here for the American market great. The more we can make in Europe for the European market, great. Even if it's the same product, that you find opportunities to, double manufacture. I think it's going to continue to allow companies to hopefully feel a little more freedom.
It's amazing. And technology, obviously, it's a big question as well. It has so many places, but is it changing your practice and that of your peers, your competitors, your clients?
Um, it's funny when I first really thought about how if and how I wanted to use AI. I decided like I don't want to touch it. And then I realized, you know what? I came from the music industry where they were scared of Napster, right? Instead of using it as a tool, the record labels were scared of it. 3D printing came along and manufacturers were worried, oh no, that's it for us. Everything's going to
Yeah.
be 3D printed. And if we use it as a tool and we learn how to use it the right way, it's great. Now, going back to my roots, my grandfather and my father, materiality was everything to them. For me to show a client an image in Photoshop and Keyshot, all the software that I was using for so long, it would be impossible to show you exactly what I'm trying to say with that material, with
Yeah.
that detail, with that joinery, whatever. It would be like, oh, I kind of get it. Yeah, all right.
It's like a move forward. It's a step in the
Yeah. So
process.
now it's just like I can use it to tell the story of the material, to tell the story of the process that I want to see, the love that I want to kind of give to this piece. And so it's like I'm continuing on that handmade legacy of my father and my grandfather through the digital realm.
That's really cool.
It's interesting.
I mean, okay, so we're going to be coming up on time, so I have two questions before the final one.
Okay.
Magazines have long described you as having a quote unquote reductive approach to the craft. And you're said to quote unquote believe in design that is uncomplicated, rational, and manages to find the perfect balance of form, function, and concept. Sounds very lofty. But I also know that you wrote a really lofty thesis project, which was called The Altruistic Imperative, which I think has context these two things together in your practice. How does this relate to not fast furniture and your kind of sense of the world?
Wow. Okay. When I was in grad school, I went to Pratt Institute. I had a man named Alan Chachinov as my thesis advisor, and at that time, I was still in that making mode, and he knew that, and he said, we're giving you a theoretical thesis, figure it out, but you're not making a thing."
Wow.
And I was just like, "Okay, here goes," and I thought like, okay, delved into my brain, like what would I want to do, what would I want to kind of say. And I realized, every design firm has a process, right? And this idea of altruism is it's there's no word for it, not altruism, but the idea of helping someone along the way can kind of take different shapes wherever, like depending on where in the process you're injecting it. But I always thought like making furniture better, making furniture simpler, more elegant. Then there's a I don't know, there's solace in softness, for instance. If you go back to the international style, okay, post World War II, the Eames and everyone, they created a sense of comfort and belonging and safety through their furniture.
Yeah.
The chaos that we're living through now, the uncertainties we're living through now, we want that softness. We want that shelter. We want to come home and just feel right. We want to go to the office and feel right. So that reductive kind of quality, it's always like, what don't we need? What can we eliminate? Pure form, I think, is something that humans respond to, whether they know it or not.
Whether they know it or not.
Yeah. If you go into a space that's a upholstered box versus one that has some softness to it, there's a difference. It affects you in a very unique way.
Yeah, I mean, this is the neuroaesthetic conversation
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
coming up and
Yeah.
various other cognitive understandings that we have.
And you've had conversation with Sushi Ready, and
Yeah.
they're all speaking, to the same kind of points. We're just doing it with different things in different ways. So it's fascinating.
It totally is.
Yeah.
This is a pretty hard pivot into the second to last question, which is you teach at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Which is a pretty renowned school, especially where the Wharton School is, which is the business school, hardcore economics, hardcore business. But there's a joint program, which is Integrated Product Design Program, which bridges the schools of architecture, design, and Wharton Business School. You've been teaching there for a while. Many listeners might know that I'm an MBA from, with a school in Europe that has a partnership with Wharton, actually. So I know this well, and I find that there is a real limitation on the conversation of business within design curriculum, and there's definitely a full absence of design within the business school curriculum. That is fundamental. And IF Design, who presents, Future of XYZ, just launched an academy also trying to bridge this gap. How do you see the next generation coming up? And is this program unique, or like, how do you train not fast furniture thinking, not fast anything thinking into the designer mindset?
Yeah. So I got a master's degree at Pratt, and more than anything, it was about how to see differently, how to see in a very unique way, how to know the difference between a millimeter, quarter inch, at 1 degree on angle, so it was very visually focused. And so, which is extremely important when we have that, functionalism versus stylist conversation. When I started my practice, I realized very early on, as I got into the contract market, that's not everything. We need to solve problems. We need to find market opportunities. So basically, when I had the opportunity to create a class with a friend and colleague of mine, Michael Avery, we co-teach it. We created the course based on my understanding of what designers coming into the field might need. So I right away, I make them study brands, because you're not designing for yourself. You're designing for a brand and their market and their needs, right?
Absolutely.
On top of that, you're designing for specific materials and processes, et cetera. But you have to look at the market, and you have to say what's not there, And they learn that through just observation, and then brand studies, and then small sketches and exercises, and then by the end of it, they have this product that solves a real need in the market. And it's so important for the world of education to kind of bridge design and business, because I use design as a business tool. That is what I do first.
Interesting.
Right? It's a craft, it's an art, it's a form of sculpture, but more than anything, it needs to be a business tool, because you need companies to hire you for a very specific reason, and most of them have very specific needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a lesson for all of our listeners and viewers who are in the design space, or I'd call also the business space. Like, what's the real need?
Yeah.
Okay, last question. I ask always my guests. The first and last question are the same. What's your greatest hope, Brad, for the future of not fast furniture, I should say? We always say 25-ish years, so that's 2050.
What is my hope? What is my big dreams?
Your big dream.
No, I think we have to continue to acknowledge that we can't continue to simply do the same thing over and over again. This industry's done amazingly well in recreating what the office could be, recreating what education can be. Right, interior design firms, architecture firms, they're on the such an amazing trajectory, and I think we just have to carry that on and kind of teach younger designers coming up that it's not about an Instagram it's about a need. I always talk about like wants and needs, right? You could design something somebody wants, but say there's 1,000 chairs somebody wants. You design something that somebody needs, there's not 1,000 of those. If you're designing the right product, there's no other option. And so I think we're on that trajectory. We're on the right path. I think materiality, locality, I think those are all extremely important. Re-educating about craft. A lot of factories, let's say in North Carolina, you can't find an upholsterer or a cutter or a pattern maker under 40, 50 years old these days, So an education back into...
like the luxury sector in Europe has had to do as well.
Right, absolutely. I think we need to do that. I think companies need to be take on that role, because if they don't, it's going to disappear. But I'm very hopeful. I think coming to a show like this at NeoCon, you see that people are trying. People are really putting their brains into it,
I love that. Putting some muscle into it.
Putting muscle into it.
Brad Ascalon, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Future of XYZ. It's remarkable that we've just done it with your voice cracking and my nervousness of being live. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. All right.
And Rob Schultz, I just have to give a shout out. Surround Podcast producing for us live today. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers, both in person and who are online when this releases. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks with the next not live episode. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.